So, Doctor, I would just want to know the curriculum we are still talking about. How can we, just like in a nutshell, how can we arrive at developing it, changing it for it to reflect our own realities, our own cultural backgrounds, and the situation of our countries? Because of course people are talking about leapfrogging and all, but we still need to develop the basis of education before going there. So also teaching civil war to a society that has suffered from it, so that it doesn't repeat itself. How do you think we can arrive at changing that curriculum?
I think what we need to do at this point is start to decolonize our curriculum. And one of the things we haven't done since independence is to completely decolonize our educational system and decolonize the curriculum. And we need to begin to first do like what I call like an inward thinking of understanding our African values, African systems, African processes. And then what we then need to do is then to begin to then match those values and systems to to an outward outlook. Like for instance, it's like you take Western technology with Japanese spirit, right? Yeah. So it's when you go to Japan, it speaks Japanese because they've been able to modernize, domesticate the modernization. Yeah. It's all based on Japanese spirit and Japanese spirituality and thinking. Even the work culture in Japan, it's about the culture of Japan comes superior around the work culture. And so for us, we have, as she was talking about civic education, we have a lot of values that are ingrained, characters that are ingrained within our cultures. Our cultures are very rich in how they train us, and how they empower us with things to do and things not to do. The challenge I have today with a lot of our school systems, our university systems, our formal systems, is that whenever there is an issue, we've looked at the analysis is always the culture is the barrier. Oh, our African culture is limiting us. Our African culture is destroying us. Our African culture is a problem. So we've never looked at the culture as an empowering tool. Yes. We've never looked at the culture as an enhancer. So when we looked at, for instance, even when I talked to people during Ebola, the thing was that the culture of touching the dead and burying the dead is a big problem. This African culture of perception. But then this is a global thing. The American will want to bury his dead. The European wants to bury their dead. So this is not just an African culture. So we have to then look at what aspects of the culture that enhances processes and what aspects of the culture maybe that needs to be reformed. But I think part of the challenge is that we are not, and the challenge I've always said is that from 1960 to today, we've produced more graduates than in 1960. In 1960, Sierra Leone, we had a better economy than South Korea. We exported rice. We did stuff on the backs of people who never had a university education. But today, in 2020, we are saying the ground dry. In 2020, we are as more dependent today when we have more graduates than in 1960. Yet we say today we are the most advanced. We are more sophisticated, and we are more technologically dependent. So to me, it's that dichotomy where we are not truly bringing back to the curriculum in a way that the curriculum does the basics for us. How do we work on our agriculture? How do we build our, even honey production? You go to the village in Falaba, Ganya, and all these people, they all know how to produce honey. But we are not regularizing that into our curriculum and make it something that a student who goes to school knows how to actually modernize that and domesticate it within the system.
Yeah, there's a curiosity about that. To be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Professor. Yeah. That was so deep and so true. And I think we are fooling ourselves if we do think that there is a way for us to go forward if we don't reconcile with our own identity. Who are we exactly? Who are we? And we get very, seasoned in who we are before we try to impact any other people. And also we need, I do think, to stop dwelling in the past. We have been colonized, we have been enslaved, and all of that, because, the past has also been very wide. But we are moving forward with all those burdens and all those excuses, and it all boils down to mindset. The mindset of somebody who always accuses others instead of working on themselves, which is something I think we really need to quit. So before we go to the question and answer session, I will hand the floor to Francis. We have a very inspiring guest among us who will be playing music for us today.
My mama said to me that she went to school in the 70s, but nothing has changed till date. Yeah. My papa said to me that we went to school in the 80s, but nothing has changed till date. So if we must learn well, things has got to be practical. The internet is critical. So we need a change. Bring new ideas. Bring up the system now. Ignition up, ignition up. Say we need a change. Drop new ideas, yeah. Ignition up. Bring up the system now. Ignition out. With education, yeah. Life will be alright, yeah. With education, yeah. Life will be alright. So yeah. We need reform, we need a change. In light of the 21st century, in light of the 21st century, yes, we need reform. Yes, we need it. Need a change. In light of the 21st, light of the 21st century, light of the 21st century. So bring in the change. Ignition out. Drop new ideas. Ignition out. Ignition out. Ignition out. Ignition out. So bring in the change. Yeah. Ignition out. Drop new ideas. Ignition out. Light up the system. Ignition out. Ignition out. Ignition out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for these inspiring songs. These people are really able, because they were just given the theme of today's topic and they did this great job. Thank you so much. Thank you. And this is the first time we have this at the Ignition Hour, because we usually have vendors who come and showcase their products. But today they came with this amazing song that moved us all. The only thing I was happy about was they stopped before I started dancing, because when I started I never stopped. Yeah, so just to close, I would like to ask the question about the role of the parents. And I always love to also talk about the role of a powerful mother, an empowered mom. So what is the role of that family when it comes to, to perpetuating what is learned from school, or even bridging the gaps between what was supposed to be told and what is actually told to kids?
All right. So I would say parents have a huge fundamental role. So growing up with my dad had a rule of thumb. His rule of thumb was that we will go to school, but no English at home. So English stops at the door. So when when you're in the house, you had to speak any other African language, but not English. So, I mean, before I thought that was like, oh my God, he was punishing us. But now I see the benefit of what he did at the time. And that, I was able to, master, my Fula, Mandingo, and all these languages. But also, it gave me a thought process. Because now when I write, I become a much better writer because I can take my thinking in Mandingo, the rich way of thinking, or my thinking in Fula, and in Fula you can conjugate one word into many words, and I bring it into my English. And my white friends would be like, oh man, what's that word? And I also say, man, I have something to teach you. I got you. But I think my mom has been a pillar in this sense too. My mom is someone who came at that crux of time between, the colonial period when education was just coming in. And so she went to school for a day and was removed from school because she was a woman. The colonial period gave priority to men. So men go to school, not the women. And so some of the imbalance we see today in Africa between men and women actually arose at that period. And so my uncle, in the other hand, went to school, and my mom was, followed my uncle. But what that also has allowed my mom is to actually have a very strong mastery of the traditional systems and history and values and all that. And so one of the things I feel like I have benefited a lot is a sense that I learned all my Western education and all my sciences and all that stuff, but I come home, I get grounded in that African culture, the readings, the writings, and what history and what other stuff. So up till now, my mom, who is very intelligent, very good historian, very strong in the way she disciplined us. We were all boys, so she raised boys, and how to raise boys is a very difficult thing. But she was very firm. But also, I think it was the love that parents can bring into the process, that love and support. So for me, I've always been this curious kid and this person who wanted to do multiple projects. I've always been engaged in projects, even as little as I was, in Kabbalah, I was always in ponds, taking water here, going to fish and putting stuff here, bringing it, I would catch a bird and try to kind of make it not to die and try to give it some medication. So all those crazy things, but they knew that they have to support me in all these processes. And it means also I have a meal all the time. I had stuff, I had food, I had anything I wanted, I get it at home. And I think that aspect of support is critical. And it's also an aspect of imbibing in you your sense of who you are. So I think that sense of who I was, that also came from my dad and my parents. And on holidays, they would make me go to Guinea or go to Senegal and see that cultural lineage of who I was. And I would travel with my mom. She says, oh, this was your ancestor, they fought this war, they were buried here. And what that created for me was that when I went to the US is where if you are an African, you actually will be in Africa for all your years in Africa. You don't know you are a black man. Until you get to the US, you realize today you are a black man. And so when I was in the US, I knew my sense of who I was. Because your culture should serve as the 7 lenses of culture, your basis of identity. So I knew strongly who I was. I was Alhaji, I was this Farafin, I have this strong sense of the ancestry I came from, the man who came from direct lines through Mansa Musa and all these lines and all these great people who I could say. So I knew that sense was around me. So I was never in that sense of a low self-esteem. And I also then knew I could compete with you at every level. So I held my head high. And I think that sense of culture is important because it also provides you the motivation. The sense of motivation is a spring of motivation. And I also knew that my basis of evaluation, I could evaluate better. So when you tell me that, this is it, in the US. I also will say this is not the standard of judgment, because my own thing also is not that bad. You know, even though we think, okay, someone says me written form of learning is good form of learning, but that doesn't mean the oral form of learning is terrible. So we must, you know, so when you learn all this aspect of culture, and you're able to then understand so many aspects of who you are, and you are not intimidated. And I think it's all starts from the household, and then it is something that has to be reinforced through the educational system.
Yeah. Thank you so much to your mom and dad for raising this amazing person. And really it takes a great mom and dad to put you up, to see a potential in you and to develop it. Because there are also parents who just like, you know, destroy whatever great stuff they see in their kids because they do believe that it's too dangerous to think like that or to behave like that. So it's really something we need to try and capitalize on. Would you like to add something?
Sure. I think like Professor said, I came from background and a family that was very supportive. Being an African raised in America, my parents definitely made sure to put culture at the forefront of everything that we did. We ate rice at home, we ate cassava leaves, we ate all of these different things. And so when I went out into the world, exactly, I knew who I was, I knew where I was coming from. And I knew that the stories that were being told outside of my home were something different than what I had experienced. And being able to come to Sierra Leone and be able to, you know, come on holidays and have that experience, I was also able to share with other people as well. I think parents, the home is a foundation of where education begins. It's where you're going to get comfortable in where you go and what you do. But I also think that it's not just your parents, there's also guardians, there is the community, there's extended family, especially in the African context in which we talk about the village raising the child, which is a true context. And so everybody has a role to play when it comes to contributing to the foundation of education at home. And I go back to what I said before. It's not just about educating the mind, it's also about educating the heart as well. This is how we know who we are as a people, how you go forth in society, and how you're able to contribute to society as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really very, you know, very inspiring to see people who recognize the importance of the basis that they have come from. Because I do believe that if the basis is not strong, then we are lost. We don't exactly know who we are, and at the end of the day, any wind that comes just blows us away. And that's how we lose even a sense of, you know, where to return, where to, even if you go to the States, to anywhere in the world, knowing that this is the place that you owe so much. You owe so much because it's the country that have given you all that you have. And that's what I always love to say about the diasporas. Coming back to Africa is not an option, it's something we all should stand for. We need to welcome our diasporans and invite them to coming back to Sierra Leone. And that is something we really need to do, not only Sierra Leone, I mean, but all the African countries. But there is something great we need to do in order to allow them to be really attracted by our countries. And that is loving it, serving it, and making it attractive by beautifying it, by cleaning it, by making it clean and you know, sane in terms of not being vector to those diseases that nobody is attracted to. So I think, having said that, I would like to give the floor to Francis. Or are you still? We can go on. Okay, so you know we love talking, so we can go on and go on again. Yeah. So I think we can still continue in this discussion, because there is something that we also have not talked about. It's like that those activities, the fact of getting the kids out of classroom, going to field trips, to you know, to adventures, showing them the tallest mountain in Sierra Leone and telling them that there are mountains that are 5 times higher than it, so that they start, you know, being interested in research and all that. Yeah. So how can we also bring that into the curriculum? Because we have now curriculum development.
Well, I think that, like we said, it's about being intentional about what we want and what we want to be able to produce out of Sierra Leone and who we want these Sierra Leoneans to be. One thing that we talk about at Excel is about brain gain and not brain drain, right? Having a responsibility to go out and explore the world. Yes, get all of the best things from the world, but also being able to come back and apply that here in Sierra Leone so that we can actually grow as a nation. If we continue to all leave and not be able to come back, I think we do a disservice to not only ourselves, to our history, to our people. In terms of getting young people curious, yes, I think the country is so huge. One thing I could say is I've been to all 14 districts in the country. My mother can't even say that she's done that in her life. We need to also start exploring outside of Freetown. Freetown is not Sierra Leone. We have so many different wonders across our country that we need to explore, which is a part of education. It's about getting out, it's about exploring and stirring that curiosity. So it comes from the classroom, and it comes from homes as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And building on that, I think that's for me, that sort of experiential learning, experiential education, more practical, more understanding of yourself and your environment is what I've been trying to cater for. So, whether I teach a medical student or I teach a student from a college, one of the things that is very fundamental and very important is the power of observation. Just being able to observe things around you. And, I did a simple exercise with final year students doing an environmental health class with me. And they are in Frobe College. And then I said, well, let's just do a walk around campus. And on this walk around campus, nobody says a word to each other. We are not talking. But what I want to see is your power of observation of things around you. Because we walk past things every day. And we get conditioned in such a way that we don't even realize they are around us. And we did this exercise on campus. And it was just tremendous to see when we came back to sit down and reflect how the students were seeing things like the massive trash on campus and the massive lack of public latrines or toilets on campus, that every other young man on campus stands and just pees on campus, which is the most unideal thing in any university setting in the world. Because what happens, if you think of the agents of disease transmission, that same guy who had just gone and peed will come again and bind with you again without washing their hands. And then in the same areas where they go, then you see a bunch of young kids from the community around who's also going to come and scavenge. So we, right around here on campus, that should be like the citadel of things, and where you actually should be doing, then you become the agent of disease transmission. So it's important, the experiential part, whether it's young kids, when I do this exercise with young kids in Kabalabua primary school, like class 4 and downwards, we take a walk, and then what I want them to do is to actually draw for me how many buildings you saw, what's the road, what did you see? It's just amazing, because the root of science, the root of being the next best scientist is based on observations. And when you observe things in your community, you are able to then understand what is good, what is bad, and then you're able to offer solutions to it.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I think time is now against us. We need to proceed to the questions and answer session.
So I have one question. I said here, I believe the role of teachers and educators is important for our growth and for the transformation of Sierra Leone. So I would like for the panelists to just elaborate their thoughts on the role and importance of teacher in transforming our education.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The question that I'm having here, Madam said that there are a lot of cracks and problems in the educational system. So what are the steps that are put in place to fix those gaps and problems?
Good afternoon, everyone. This question goes to Professor Njai. As a profound Sierra Leonean, what will you do, or what we should do to support or implement the idea of having cultural education in Sierra Leone?
So let's start with the role of teachers in transforming education in Sierra Leone. I think the role of teachers is so very important. I think it's critical. For me, the investment that we need to do in education definitely starts with our teachers. Getting people who are actually passionate about education. Right now, I feel like education is a stopgap measure. It's the step into going into something else. But if we actually attract or make teaching attractive with incentives of why people should be passionate about education and giving back, I think that we would definitely see a shift in education in Sierra Leone. In terms of the cracks and being able to actually fix the cracks, I think that's something that we need to look at collectively. We need to look at it from the point of the Ministry of Education, but we also need to look at it from the point of society as well. I said this before, what do we want from the education system? What does an educated Sierra Leonean look like? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we want to be able to have? And then look at the ways in which we can be able to assess those things. So in the last 2 years, particularly, there's been some work in education, a project called Lewilan. And Lewilan actually looked at developing the curriculum for both junior secondary school and senior secondary school, with ensuring that pupil handbooks, not only have they created lesson plans for teachers that are step-by-step, so anybody can go into the classroom and actually be able to apply those lessons. And it's actually cascaded so that it's a developmental learning towards the assessment. It's not just waiting till you get to JSS 3 and then studying for the Beckett and hoping that you're going to pass. It's not about just getting to the end of senior secondary school and say, oh, WASP is coming, now I need to cram this education. It's about making sure that teachers are cascading the learning all throughout the years so that at the end, it's not just a culmination, it's making sure that you assess their knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Yes, thank you so much, Yeniva.
Yeah, and I think teachers play a fundamental role in our educational system, and I think one of our biggest challenges right now with the formal education, also the Western education where we are taking right now, is that honestly there's a problem. You go to many communities and villages, you say, where is the qualified person to teach chemistry or to teach biology or to teach any other subject, when the person in that community is probably someone who has failed the WAS exam, or maybe hasn't even completed the WAS, and they are the headmaster.
Yes.
Yes. And we have, we are talking about everybody must learn, everybody must go to school. But then you go to these communities, where is the school building? The school building is probably some touch, and the teacher there is probably cannot even do the most formal process. So I think teachers are a valuable part, and paying the teachers very, very well, and also providing in our curriculum, part of the steps of fixing the broken system, is teacher education. So it's not enough to go get a degree in biology. But your degree in biology should be biology with education, a B.Ed. You are a teacher. So it's not just to come out, I know physics, but you have to know physics to teach schools. And we are lacking in that process, because we had for some time in Njai College of Education doing that process. But now things have just cascaded in a way, things are broken. And I think what we now have in a lot of our broken educational system is a lot of rote memorization. You just go and then people just, I was talking to SS3 students in Kabbalah, and I said, what is a system, biology? And they, the digestive system, and the respiratory system, and all this. So it's just like, almost like whatever we memorize. And people cannot relate them. We cannot relate the learning to stuff happening around us. And so how do we, going back to what Yeniva was saying, the education should serve a purpose. What does the education tries to do? Is it fixing a certain problem? Is it geared towards solving some of the needs of the country today? So when it takes Sierra Leone, in terms of the challenges of the country today, do we have the ongoing capability to solve those challenges? And how are we looking at, this is our capability, this is where we are training people to match those capabilities in terms of our educational system. So the educational system is to serve all those purposes. And again, I go back to the last question, the implementing cultural education. This is my area of passion. Because for me, fundamentally, I believe in the primacy of culture in both the exploratory and the explanatory part of society. The primacy of culture is important. You cannot go outside your culture. You cannot use exogenous models to solve endogenous problems. You cannot take a model from IMF and World Bank that is written by somebody who is not Sierra Leonean to solve the Sierra Leonean problem. You have to understand that the thinking has to be from an inward. Start thinking inside, inward. Use element of what you have, and then say, okay, well, this is where I will need something from outside, because knowledge is not the domain of any one culture. So when we talk about scientific knowledge today, or development today, Western technologies and scientific knowledge, was all knowledge that was borrowed from different parts. So the sense of direction, compass, came from the Chinese. Arabic numerals in mathematics is now used in algebra and all those. Medicine is filled with things that came from different cultures, Arabic, African cultures, coffee, and all these things are coming. So the sense, you have to borrow from each other. And then so the knowledge itself is not something that is the domain of any one culture. So that's why we must begin to think first, inwardly, and then use whatever knowledge we can get. We can take from the Chinese, we can take from the Indians, we can take from the Americans what is working today. But today, when we talk about technology, everybody's talking about we need to do technology in Sierra Leone, innovation. Like if every day, the guy doing the Omolanke is an innovation. He's created an innovation to push that thing. Innovation is ripe around our cultures. Every day people are innovating in our cultures. That's the innovative part. But the technology we are talking about today is to bring repackaged technologies from the West and just package it to us and we come use it. So what are we doing? We are giving more money to Facebook, more money to Google, more money to Apple. Because these are the major global, IBM and others, they're the major global technologies. What are we doing technologically to match them? That is unique to Sierra Leone. What are we developing? And we have to begin to think that, because when you continually get these technologies from outside, it is the next phase of colonialism, which is called the technological colonialism. And all of us here now are becoming victims of it.
Thank you so much.
So my question is, don't you think that we need a panel of academics to review our curriculum system to match our cultures in Sierra Leone?
Yes, do we need a panel of academics? I think that we need academics as a part of the panel. I don't think it needs to be a panel of academics itself. I think we need academics on the panel, but so many other people that are on the panel. That's why I said in terms of making sure that it's a communal effort, right? So even the woman in the village, how can Sois have a part in education? How can, you know, the chief have a part in education, talking about leadership, talking about making sure that we actually pass leadership on and how that is influenced in our culture. So I think many different people need to be a part of that panel. And I don't want that panel to be something that we just talk about here. It's something that we need to demand. If we sit here and just say, okay, this, you know, for the first time really in the last 15 years, everybody's focus is on education. It's now just about singing about free education, but we actually need to demand what type of education we want for ourselves, because guess what, I've gotten my education. You guys are the next generation who needs to demand absolutely so much more from your country, from your government, and from yourselves as well.
Education, to me, must encompass is a sum total of both your technical as well as the norms and values of your society. And I think at this 21st century, right now, what is happening is that we are having a lot of people going to school. We are producing a lot of elites, a lot of highly educated people. But why are we struggling? Why are we unable to still solve our Sierra Leone problems? Sierra Leone is about 60 years old now. If you are a human being, if Sierra Leone was a human being at 60 years old, do we still, like in 2 months from now, we are all celebrating independence. Are we really independent? No. Are we really independent? So at 60 years of age, you know, we should be like saying, okay, today, that we shouldn't be talking about the ground dry anymore. You know, we should be then harnessing our technical, our educational knowledge to transform the lives of our communities. But again, what is happening is that you have students, for instance, in Sierra Leone, who will go through a program on gender and development studies at FBC. Who will never know anything about Madame Yoko, or by Koblo Gulam, or about any of the strong Sierra Leonean women who laid the foundation on gender relationships. But they will know everything about gender paradigms and feminism that arose out of the US, Title IX and all that. So we have to begin to think about what do we do in terms of our educational aspect that empowers you. Education doesn't necessarily mean, when you see the people here, we look at our parliament in Sierra Leone, they stand there to speak the biggest English sometimes. You have people wanting to be so proud of themselves that I spoke the biggest English that your constituent doesn't even understand. But again, you go to around the world, we say, what is the standard? What are the standards of evaluation of what is powerful, what is good, and what is all this stuff? It's still being the Eurocentric approach. We are not looking towards the most marginalized Afrocentric approach and then bringing it front and center. So, for instance, a guy from India or in Yugoslavia will win a Nobel Prize writing literature in their language, or will write something writing in their language. But you in Sierra Leone, you are expected to write the greatest English language to win a Nobel Prize in literature. Yes. 2 Japanese scientists can sit and talk Japanese together and talk Japanese. You and I cannot speak Mende today together and be good Mende scientists. And all of us here will say, oh my God, Anna Mende didn't talk, they're not good. Good. They're bad, they're terrible. Good. As long as they speak Mende, they are not good, because our standards of evaluation have been measured against a more dominant Western culture. So that then impacts the way we think, the way we solve our own unique problems. Right? So, like when I did mathematics for a while, I struggled with mathematics growing up. Until one of my uncles says in Madingo that you have to add them when you do multiply. I never knew what multiply was. 2 times 2 is 4. But if you add them, in our languages, it's to add them. So when you add them, it's actually the same thing. So the traditional systems have a way. If you go to these people, they will add everything up. They know how to do maths. They know how to do stuff. But we haven't explored that. And we are learning now, we are translating it from the English and coming back to us. And we are trying to process it in a way to understand it. But the Chinese have become better and the Japanese have become better because you are talking your language. You are learning it in your language. So the maths and all the systems, the keyboards and everything is in their languages. Yeah. So then they become better at processing it and processing it better. But we haven't done that in a way. And in a way, we are trying to then try to develop. It's like when you take fall, you put her inside water. You know, this is not your environment. So you're learning a whole lot. We are getting a lot of PhDs, a lot of educated people. But we still cannot solve our problems. Because it's like we are operating outside of our own environment when we become educated. So we become elitist. So then, even the factor of like going upline, Waterloo becomes country. Waterloo na country and they go upline. Other than upline people and they have them figure. So the concept becomes, we have become out of touch with who we are and solving our own unique problems. And so what becomes important, the day something becomes important, is when UNDP comes and says, hey, let's go to that community there. Oh my God, black soap making is so good now. Yes. Let's make black soap. Hey, black soap today. Today let's go launch black soap. National Day for Black Soap. Shea butter is so good today. Oh my God, let's go launch shea butter. So this is all these things. Why can't we, in our own processing, in our own thinking, think that this is very important and then utilize through our system, the university. That's why I'm always after all these college universities and lecturers and professors. Our universities should be fundamentally the drivers of all of this. They should drive. The US is developed today. The US is #1 country in the world. No doubt about it. And the only reason is because of the universities in the US. The universities in the US have risen up. The only reason today all papers in science are published in English is because of the universities in the US. Germany used to take the lead. Germany, in fact, science, all of the Germans, the science, early chemistries were all in German. And the US overtook them after World War because of the dominance of researchers from the universities in the US. So our universities have to set the pace. And in trying to kind of go in, if it is, Maggi making, we get with Kinder. But still with the import Maggi.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
Professor. Both of you, thank you so much for your presence, for the in-depth analysis of this educational system, which we cannot finish in an hour. So that's the reason why we also invite you to join your voice through the already existing conversation on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook, please. And I would just like to conclude by again inviting all of us here to please act on what we have learned, to just not let it be another edition of the Ignition Hour. But if we are somehow ignited today, let's start from the community level. Let's start teaching other people in our communities what we know about. Sexual reproductive health, I always talk about that. Why sexual reproductive health is an issue, why we're having this rate of teenage pregnancy. It's because those women out there who are supposed to be playing the role of the paternal or maternal aunt, who would tell you about, your menstrues beforehand and stuff like that, have stopped playing the role. What can we do as women to help our younger sisters know exactly what to expect and how to live with that? The same as other related issues. How do we champion it? How do we take the lead in our communities so that most of the problems we have at community level will cease to be problems at community level? Thank you so much for being here with us today, and see you next month when we celebrate great female entrepreneurs, because it's March
and we have great entrepreneurs who are female and who also make things happen. So thank you so much, and see you.